Welcome to Beyond the Powerline Road, a podcast dedicated to bringing inspirational stories and inspirational messages to you. Do you know what an ammonite is? An ammonite is a fossil. It's a fossil of a mollusk, and it's a squid-looking thing that is found pretty much in all places of the world. And they can be from very, very small, thumb size, to very big, human size, or even larger. And these ammonites tend to wind up getting fossilized. They wind up, there's about 3 different methods in which something can become a fossil. But with the ammonites, in most cases, the animal dies. And as it dies, it winds up being covered by sediment. And as it's decomposing, there is water washing over it. And the water will introduce into the casing, if you will, of the ammonite, where the soft stuff once was, minerals. And some of these minerals will start growing, and under pressure and mineralization, you can have absolutely beautiful fossils where you will have agatized fossils, or fossils which are crystallized in the center. And it's the nice interaction between the water and the shell, if you will, of the ammonite that over a period of time and pressure and different things will make a very strong and very beautiful fossil. In the 1st century AD, it just so happens that not only do we have fossils that tend to have crystallization occurring, but we also had cement that did. And you're probably wondering where this is going, because I'm taking fossils and cement and tying it together, or actually concrete in this particular case. But the Romans had concrete that would set up and do well in saltwater, or when the rains came, or when it is flooded, the concrete that would actually become stronger. And the reason it became stronger is because of the fact that at the time, and the science is lost, they know some of the materials, but they really don't know how much of the materials were blended together. But they know that volcanic ash and lime and salt water were put together with aggregates to produce this wonderful concrete mix. And the concrete lasts for years and years. And it turned out that even in the ancient city of Jericho, some of the concrete streets have been discovered. So there is concrete around the time of Jesus' time that was put in as water breaks, so that we didn't have waves washing up on the shore. And these concrete slabs have lasted through the years, 2,000 years to be exact. And so what scientists did when they researched this is they found out that the ash that was inside the concrete would be washed away, if you will, by the little bit of water that would percolate in, because of the fact that concrete is not waterproof. And as the water would percolate in, what it would do is it would bring in certain minerals, and the minerals would interact with the aggregate compounds in there and produce crystals. And these crystals, in a sense, fossilized the concrete, made it harder than what it was, made it more stable than what it was. So what happens is the interaction of water and the minerals for water can do a whole lot to different objects and of nature. What we're going to look at today is, to some extent, how we wind up being affected by water, and how we wind up being affected by the crystallization process as we are trying to attach ourselves or be associated with Jesus Christ. So the lesson today is, how can we attach ourselves to the rock? Now, with the resources I'm going to wind up talking about, and I'm going to keep going back to the Ammonite, and I'm going to go back to the concrete to the first century. But the resources I'm going to talk about is Moses and his exodus from Egypt, and the Sermon on the Mount. And I'm going to go back and forth between them, so you can be looking at Luke 6, Matthew 7, Exodus 17, and Numbers 20 come into play quite a bit. Now, there's a couple other verses, but those are primarily the ones. Now, we know that Jesus was a carpenter. And what does that mean? There wasn't a lot of wood in the area. So the word carpenter back then had a little bit of a different meaning. It meant basically an individual that would build things. So you're looking at an individual that would build foundations, build walls, was able to be a mason in addition to a lumber worker. And so Jesus may well have worked with some of the concrete of the time, but he built houses more than likely. And these houses were of stone and mortar, and they were built layer upon layer, attached to one another, and very often you will find that these houses were rock. So, what is the primary verse? And why are we talking about rock? Because we know the rock is stable. If we go to Luke, chapter 6, verse 27, Jesus said, and this is a sermon at the Mount, "Whoever cometh to me and heareth my saying and doeth them, I will show you to whom he is like. He is like a man that built his house and digged deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And when the flood arose, and the stream beat vehemently upon the house, and could not shake it, for it was founded upon the rock. For he that heareth and doeth not is like a man that is without a foundation, built a house on earth, against which the stream beat vehemently, and immediately it fell, and the ruin of the house greated." And the ruin of the house was great. So we're looking at the word, to some extent, founded. The definition of founded is to set upon, to establish a firm basis for an enduring existence. So, when the house is founded upon the rock, it is supposed to be there for a long, long duration, much like the concrete of the first century that has lasted for 2,000 plus years. All right, I want to now start going back and looking at Moses, because I had mentioned this, that Moses and the rock comes into play here. 1 Corinthians 10, it says, "For I do not want you to be unaware, brothers, that our fathers were all under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and all were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. And all ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink. For they drank from a spiritual rock that followed them, and the rock was Christ." So when we are talking about the rock, we are referring to Jesus Christ in every situation. And even the New Testament, referring back to Moses and Moses' exodus, refers to the rock as Christ. So what did this rock do? If you go to Exodus 17:6, it says, "Behold, I stand before thee there upon the rock of Horeb, and thou shalt smite the rock, and there shall come water out of it, and the people will drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders in Israel." And if you go to Numbers 20, verse 7, it says, "The Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Take the rod, and gather thou the assembly together, thou and Aaron thy brother, and speak unto the rock before their eyes, and it shall give forth water. And thou shalt bring forth to them water out of the rock, so that thou shalt give the congregation and the beasts drink." And if we look at Psalm 78, it references that exodus and that rock. Psalm 78:13. "He divided the sea and caused them to pass through. He made the waters to stand in a heap." Okay, talk about Moses and parting of the the river. In the daytime also he led them with a cloud, and at the night with the light with a fire. He clave the rock in the wilderness and gave them drink as out of a great depths. He brought streams also out of the rock and caused waters to run down like rivers. Interesting thing is the word clave here. Clave means to stay attached to. So what it's saying is God, in this particular case, God the Christ, became part of the rock in the wilderness to give them water and to give them drink. If we go to Psalms 105, we can see a very much similar story. Egypt was glad when they departed, for the fear of them fell upon them. And you remember how the Egyptians were ready for the Israelites to leave. He spread a cloud in the covering, and the fire he gave light in the night. And the people asked, and he brought quails and satisfied them with the bread of heaven. He opened the rock, and the water gushed out, and they ran in dry places like a river. For he remembered his holy promise as Abraham his servant, and he brought forth his people with joy, and his chosen with gladness, and gave them the lands of the heathen, and they inherited the labor of their people. So again, we're seeing that the rock is referenced a number of times, and it's always kind of associated with water. Psalms 62. He only is my rock and my salvation. He is my defense. I shall not be moved. In God is my salvation and my glory. The rock is my strength, and my refuge is in God. Trust in him at all times. Ye people, pour out your heart before him. God is a refuge to all of us. Selah. Matthew 7. Back to the Sermon on the Mount. Back to those particular comments that we wanted to look at. So in Matthew 7, verse 24, therefore whoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, I will liken him to a wise man which built his house on a rock. And the rains descended, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat upon that rock, and it fell not, for it was founded upon a rock. And Luke 6, the parallel verse, he is a like man that built a house and digged deep and laid the foundation on the rock. And when the floods rose and the streams beat vehemently upon the rock, it could not shake it, for it was founded upon the rock. So the foundation, building a house on the rock, is wonderful. And what is that house? That house should be us. Now, the interesting thing about it, if we look at Matthew 7, verse 21, Jesus warns the people. He said, not everyone that says unto me, Lord, Lord, shall enter in the kingdom of heaven, but he that doeth the will of my Father which is in heaven. Many will say to me, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name, and in thy name cast out devils, and in thy name done many wondrous works? And then I will profess to them, saying, I never knew you. Depart from me, ye that work iniquity. And if we look at this, it seems to be a contradiction of terms, because it says in verse 21, he that doeth the will of my Father. Verse 22, these people prophesied in the name of the Lord. They cast out demons in the name of the Lord. They may have healed in the name of the Lord. They have done good deeds in the name of the Lord, and they have done many wondrous works. But for some reason or another, they did not do the will of the Father. And so it throws us into kind of a quandary of like, okay, what do we do, and how do we wind up doing the will of the Father? And if you look at the word in verse 22, where they were talking, they said, Lord, have we not done this and done that? And so the way it appears is because of the fact that they are taking recognition by themselves as having done this and done that, that they are not doing the will of the Father. So if we go back to Numbers 20, and I only presented the first part of Numbers 20, I did not read the entire passage there on Numbers 20 until now. It says, And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Take the rod, and gather thou the assembly together, thou and Aaron thy brother, and speak unto the rock before their eyes, and it shall give forth his water, and thou shalt bring forth to them water out of the rock, so that thou give the congregation and their beast drink. Okay, you've heard that before. Verse 9. Moses took the rod from before the Lord, as he was commanded him. So he did what the Lord said. He took the rod. And Moses and Aaron gathered the congregation together before the rock. But at this particular moment in time, Moses was mad at the congregation. The congregation was a bunch of whiny individuals complaining about everything. And Moses was not in the mood for it. And he said to them, Hear ye, ye rebels, must we fetch you water out of the rock? And Moses lifted up his hand, and he smote the rock twice. Now the water came out abundantly, and the congregation drank, and the beast did too, because of the fact that the Lord had promised to provide the drink. But remember what happened to Moses. Because Moses claimed to be the giver of the water, that he claimed that he and Aaron and God were together in this little business of providing the water, because he claimed that, and because he smote the rock rather than speaking to the rock, Moses was not allowed to go into the promised land. Moses was required to stay behind. So when we go to the sayings that Jesus talks about in Matthew chapter 7, we go to the parables and the sermon that Jesus gave, and we look at verse 24. Therefore, whoever heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them, I will liken them unto a wise man who built his house upon a rock. And if we go to 26, he says, And every one that heareth these sayings of mine and doeth them shall be likened, hearing these sayings of mine and doeth not them shall be likened unto a foolish man. So what happened is it's associated with the sayings of Jesus. What did Jesus tell us to do? And we can go to a reference in Romans 9:32. In Romans 9:32, what here talks about the Gentiles and the Israelites, and it states that Israel, which followed after the law of righteousness, had not attained the law of righteousness. And why not? Because they sought not by faith, but by the works of the law. They sought their own method of trying to achieve what God wanted them to achieve. They did not listen to God. They did not follow him in faith. Romans chapter 10:3, For being ignorant of the righteousness of God and seeking to establish their own, they did not submit to God's righteousness. So we need to humble ourselves and submit ourselves to God's righteousness. What does this mean? Well, the sayings of Jesus start in Matthew chapter 6, verse 1. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them. Chapter 6, verse 3. Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Chapter 6, verse 6. When you pray, go in the room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret. Chapter 6, 15. But if you do not forgive others their trespasses, neither will your Father forgive you. Matthew chapter 6, 17. When you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by the Father who is in secret. In Matthew 6, 21. For where your treasure is, there your heart is. Where your treasure is, there your heart is. If our treasure is to be recognized by individuals as talented, smart, rich, well-liked, that sort of stuff, our heart is there, and it is in the wrong place. So when we go back to Romans chapter 9:31 again, it says, But Israel, who pursued the law, would lead to righteousness did not succeed in reaching that law because they did not pursue it by faith, but as if it were based on works. They were trying to be seen by their constituents. They were trying to show off in public. And there's more of these sayings that Jesus said. Matthew 7:1, judge not, that you will not be judged. Luke 6:27, I say unto you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you. Luke 6:28, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. 6:31, and as you wish that others would do to you, do to them. 6:36, be merciful. 6:37, judge not. 6:38, give. 6:35, love your enemies, do good, lend and expect nothing in return, and your reward will be great. You will be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the evil also. So what happens is, if we are to be earn those crystals, if we are to be able to be stronger than the world, we need to do the sayings of Jesus. Matthew 5:45, give to them that ask thee, and from him that would borrow of thee, turn not thou away. Ye have heard that it has been said, thou shalt love thy neighbor and hate thy enemy. But I say unto you, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them that despitefully use you and persecute you, that you may be the children of your Father who is in heaven. Now, can't get much clearer than that. We need to do what Jesus tells us to do. So we need to hear his sayings. We need to do them. Whoever heareth the sayings does them. So have we successfully attached ourselves to the rock? Has it resulted in a change to us where we become stronger, where the minerals, if you will, from the water has provided us with a change inside so that we can properly affix ourselves to the rock and have it as our foundation? If so, then what is said of Samuel can be repeated by each of us. And he said, the Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, the God of my rock, in him will I trust. He is my shield and the horn of my salvation, my high tower, my refuge, my Savior. Thou savest me from violence. I will call upon the Lord, who is worthy to be praised. So shall I be saved from mine enemies. Bless you and have a wonderful day. One last verse from Romans 8, verse 1 that I would like to share with you. And it is, there is therefore now no condemnation to those who are in Jesus Christ. Have a wonderful day.